Hi, everybody. My name is Juan Robalo. I am super excited to be here and share this panel with Armando and with Pedro. Thank you for coming to our session. We are very excited to share this project and all the work behind it with all of you. We have a chat open that we can see if you want to pop questions or comments. And we have a lot of information that we are going to try to go fast through it, hoping that we can share some value with all of you. The first time I came into contact with Reserva Santa Fe with this project was probably 20 years ago, or probably a little bit more, when I was coming fresh out of school, and Armando suggested if I could do a mushroom inventory of this area, that he was starting to work on it. Not starting, he had already several years of working in it before that, but he had no mushroom lists in this forest. So what you're going to see is one of the remaining areas in the central part of Mexico, and how partnership and a very innovative approach is aiming to have a conservation development. So the next one, Pedro, I am very happy to present Armando Turrent and Pedro Gómez as the main promoters of Reserva Santa Fe, which is real estate development that you will see in Mexico, that it's aiming for the LCC certification through ILFI. So there has been many years in the works of this, and we are very excited to be able to share it and to share this conversation with all of you. So with that, Armando, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Juan. First, we would like to show you a short video of what Reserva es.
Estamos primero en esto que se llama el eje transversal neovolcánico, que te va de oriente a poniente, y entonces eso genera microclimas completamente distintos. El lugar en sí tiene una historia riquísima y tiene un microclima súper especial. Y entonces no es tanto cómo llegamos al lugar, sino cómo nos llegó el lugar, ¿no? Lo más importante que queremos transmitir en este proyecto es cómo nosotros, como seres humanos, nos podemos como especie incorporar a esta biodiversidad tan grande que encontramos en este lugar, ¿no? El atractivo principal del desarrollo como residente es precisamente el que puedas hacer esto. A pesar de que esto es parte de un parque que se llama el Otomí Mexica, es un área natural protegida que estaba destinada a ser invadida. Porque estas 350,000 hectáreas que tenemos de parque no solo producen el oxígeno que respiramos en la Ciudad de México y en Toluca y en todos los pueblos de alrededor, también captan toda la humedad de estos árboles, la bajan al subsuelo y recargan los mantos freáticos. Y bueno, creemos que la solución es esta. Tenemos que hacer proyectos sustentables, bien pensados, bien ejecutados, pues para generar estos servicios ambientales. Pero la idea de este lugar es adentrarte al bosque y poder tener espacios que realmente te inviten a interiorizarte. Eso es lo que hace que esto sea un proyecto no nada más residencial. El santuario te hace meterte como espiritualmente a quién eres. Este lugar te invita a que realmente te sientes y te quedes tranquilo un rato, ¿no? El silencio es un lujo que ya no fácilmente puedes encontrar. Y aquí sí. Pero este espacio y todos los 25 kilómetros de senderos que tenemos te invitan pues un poco a que también cuides tu cuerpo, y encuentras 50 amenidades completamente diferentes, ¿no? Poderte venir a leer un libro aquí, o venir a meditar, o venir a tomar una clase de yoga en este espacio, y como en muchos otros que vamos a tener en este lugar, y estás a 15 minutos de Santa Fe. O sea, lo que es impresionante es eso, ¿no? Si el impacto puede ser positivo, ¿por qué no ser uno más de las especies de aquí? Entonces buscamos quién certifica construcciones. El Living Community Challenge, que viene del International Living Future Institute, está conceptualizada en 7 pétalos, les llaman ellos, porque hacen esta referencia a una flor. Te garantizan que si obtienes esta certificación, tu impacto, tu huella de carbón, va a ser cuando mucho cero. En temas, por ejemplo, de agua, es increíble porque estamos con una tecnología suiza que nos garantiza que sus plantas de tratamiento individuales para cada lote de cada una de las casas es suficiente para purificar el agua. Que al final del día lo que logra es que pues, toda esta agua ya tratada la mandas a los lagos, vuelves a lograr que las cañadas vuelvan a convertirse en arroyos, se regenera un ecosistema, es regenerativa esta certificación, ¿no? Y entonces al final del recorrido de toda esta agua, que es increíble, pues la inyectamos al manto freático para que no la contamine el pueblo de al lado. Y eso lo está haciendo nuestros clientes. Y lo van a hacer conscientemente, van a saber que lo están haciendo. Y eso es lo que realmente es valioso del proyecto. Eso es un cambio de paradigma. Y pues sí es diferente, o sea, sí es un lugar que te crece. Hace que regreses a esta conexión con la naturaleza, pero estás conectado de otra forma. Es bien lindo. La verdad es que es una forma que la tienes que vivir. Tienes que estar aquí para entenderla. No te lo puedo explicar.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Juan, for the introduction, and thank you for the video, Pedro. It's been 26 years, Juan, since I first visited the site. And this is what we're going to talk about today. You know, when I first visited the site of Reserva Santa Fe, my first child was born. Today I have 5 children, and the place keeps transforming, still literally molding who my overpopulated family is. Perhaps the most relevant and yet controversial concept that Reserva encountered after registering the project in the LCC was its location. The imperative of limits to growth within the place petal states that projects in developed countries may only be built on greyfields or brownfields previously developed. But why is there an exception for developing countries like Mexico? The answer to that comes with time. I must first take you back in time. The Sierra Madre mountain ranges were formed about 1.5 billion years ago, running from north to south on both sides of the mainland. Yet there's a transverse volcanic mountain range that runs perpendicular to them. In terms of latitude, they are situated between parallels 19 and 20 of the northern hemisphere. It connects 2 ranges forming in the middle what is known today as Mexico City Valley. When the pre-Hispanic civilization of Huicuilco settled to the south of this valley in 600 BC, the dale by the hills was completely flooded by a spectacular lake. More than 425 square miles of water sat at the basin of the valley, forming what would have been today Mexico's largest lake. It's worth noting that at this latitude, lie part of the driest deserts in the world, the Saharan and the Arabian. But these volcanic mountains push central Mexico to altitudes of over 10,000 feet above sea level, allowing moisture to settle. Nearly 700 years ago, the Aztecs founded Tenochtitlan, right in the middle of the lake. The city was built in harmony with water, using a very efficient canal system for transporting goods and people. The city had the main temple, which were large pyramids, residential areas, markets, and most importantly, chinampas. I don't know if you are familiar with the term, but they are artificially built floating fields to grow crops. So the Aztecs flourished and grew their imbalance with the water of this marvelous valley for 200 years until the Spaniards arrived in 1521. After conquering the Aztecs and destroying the oldest city in the Americas, they made water in the valley their next enemy and dedicated the following 300 years to get rid of it. Unfortunately, they succeeded. Ironically, today the federal government spends millions of dollars and tons of carbon-fueled energy to pump water from up to 100 miles away, more than 3,000 feet up, to bring water back into the valley. The mountain range that flanks the valley to the west separates Mexico City from Toluca, the capital city of the state of Mexico. It is precisely on top of these hills that lies the site of Reserva Santa Fe. This place sits in the middle of a 260,000 acre state park. It's called the Otomí Mexica. Otomí, they're both names for pre-Hispanic cultures. I'm sure you're aware of who the Aztecs was, but they were called Mexicas as well. And the Otomís were the settlers that the Aztecs made slaves for many, many years once they became great warriors. And the Otomís moved to the edges of the valley, up into the mountains, precisely where Reserva Santa Fe sits today. So this area, this huge state park, is literally Mexico City's last hope to maintain and replenish the aquifer that still provides 2/3 of the water that all 23 million Chilangos, which are people from Mexico City, consume every day. It is also the most important source of oxygen and carbon capture ecosystem that we have in the region. It is home to countless native plant and animal species, including some that are endangered. These beautiful and diverse forests must be saved and protected at all costs if we wish to survive. Although Mexico has a greater amount of protected areas as a percentage of its total territory than both the US and Canada, according to the World Database of Protected Areas, we have extremely limited resources for their conservation. Protection decrees are not at all well enforced. This year, the federal government assigned a miserable $40 million budget to maintain all of the country's national parks. Nearly 70% of all federally funded protected areas within Mexico City have been invaded by squatters. The budget for 77 state parks run by the state of Mexico, including the Otomí Mexica Park, is just a notch over $1 million. There are more forest rangers trained to put out fires within our project, within Reserva Santa Fe, than in all of the state parks. Even if federal politicians had the will and the drive to protect preserved areas, they wouldn't have the resources. Pressure from both sides on the green belt are fierce and constant. I am certain that if Reserva were not here today, urban sprawl would have definitely taken over the forest by now. This is a picture taken only 200 yards north of Reserva Santa Fe facing east. You can clearly see the concrete invasion. What used to be farmland a few years back is now part of a chaotic sprawl. So peasants have no other way to go but up into the mountains, and the process continues with no real barriers to stop them. You can see in the picture at the very top of the hill how farmland has already substituted the forested land. This is why the main environmental problem in developing countries is habitat depletion. And in this next picture, you can see the outcome. This used to be a forested land no more than 50 years ago. And the problem with this is not only that it's clear cutting and that you destroy the whole ecosystem. It brings also social problems that are very real today. It brings crime, and these cities become just dormitory cities with no real jobs being generated there. So the carbon footprint for everybody to travel to their workspaces is huge. You have to bring services into this sprawls because they have, since they were done illegally, then most of the time they don't have electricity or they don't have running water or even how to get rid of their black water. So everything is wrong with this picture. Everything has to stop. And this is why we understand that the limits to growth imperative within the LCC provides the exception to less developed countries. This is why we must get involved. This is why Chilangos are getting very passionate about protecting and regenerating our forests and recovering our water. This is why Reserva Santa Fe's place needs to stop seeing history pass it by and stomp on it, to finally blossom as a sanctuary for our species, to truly integrate with nature and become the center of attention. Finally, we are listening. This is why we love and we are very proud of our place and culture. We are recovering its beauty and magnificence, and we're doing it hand in hand with its original settlers. I would now like let Pedro and Juan let you know in more detail how we intend to do this. Pedro, if you can talk a little bit about how the settlers and how we came in contact with them 26 years ago. These peasants, they really were about to leave their lands because their crops suffered from the loss of 3 natural water springs that used to flow there. The system that brings water into Mexico City that I previously mentioned from over 100 miles away built a tunnel. It's called the San Jose Analco Tunnel, and it's 200 meters below the surface. So it fractured the aquifer and dried all the springs. So when we got to this place, most of the peasants were gone. Only 68 of them remained, and they were using the land mainly to herd their sheep or to grow very low grade crops like wheat for cattle. And so it was a fertile land to be invaded for sprawling. It was ready to get invaded as far as we understand. And so this is the people that we first got into contact with, and they became our partners. We had done this before with other peasants in the past with a lot of success. Instead of really just buying them their land at very low prices and, getting rid of them, we understood that we were not coming into this place with just a white canvas and a brush to paint our own pictures. We were introducing ourselves into a social system and an ecological system that was already in process and in equilibrium. So with that in mind, we looked for help. And this is where I hand it to Pedro.
Thank you, Armando, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be a part of the Living Future. I'm Pedro Gómez Gallardo, and I'm part of the Reserva Santa Fe team. I'm going to try to take a different approach than Armando took and maybe take it a bit towards the hope side. I also tried to talk about my personal experience coming into the project. As you probably heard before, it really all starts with the paradigm shift. The transition for me came really early on. I come from a background in finance and specifically in corporate real estate. And this picture was taken in my first day at this job 13 years ago. I was asked to be part of a religious ritual with an indigenous group that was going to ask permission to the Virgin to start negotiations with us, since they were the main users of this sacred sanctuary inside of the project. It was clear for me then that any preconception I had on what type of project we were going to develop was going to have to wait. We first needed to understand we were the new guy in town. We started to soak up on the social and cultural dynamics around the site and getting a full comprehension of the interacting organisms and of the environment. Juan is going to talk about this later on when we talk about how we build our baseline with the 5-star methodology. And what was really clear, like Armando stated before, we needed to look for help. We began with a full stakeholder engagement process to try to understand the social dynamics and the impact the project was going to have, not only on the original owners of the land, but also in the entire region. By doing so, we immediately noticed that the knowledge held by the locals was a valuable asset to the design team and to the community itself. I can give you two of many examples on how we brought the community as a part of the team. Most of the deforestation inside of the project was done by locals and was done purely for economic means. It was their only source of income. So we decided to bring some of the community leaders as forest rangers, and we benefited from their knowledge for the forest. It was an amazing transformation, from lumberjacks to forest protectors. Another example, and Juan was a big part of this, is when we started doing the field trips for all these studies to build a baseline. We decided to bring in the locals to come with us. And again, the knowledge of the site was incredible. They told us where to find the plants, where to find the mushrooms, which one was edible, which one was not, which one had other uses. We also knew what the medicinal plants were inside the project. It became, again, an asset for the project itself, but for the future community. I've heard yesterday in one of the conversations that the most diverse systems are also the most resilient. We're definitely not the exception. We were introduced to the concept of integrated design with this project. So we put together a team of experts and every field with different backgrounds. Of course, we had a huge team of architects and engineers, but we also brought to the design table environmentalists, biologists. We brought in the locals, and the process was amazing. We soon found that we needed to align partners and align concepts. We needed to align the three parties. We needed to align social groups, the developer, and government, not only to make this project feasible or just, but make it truly sustainable. And also, we needed to redefine the concept of real estate. We needed to integrate wellness attributes to the project, sustainability parts to the project, but also a new type of luxury. COVID has made it extremely clear that the access to nature is the new luxury. We can leave luxury cars, big homes, or gold splashed around the walls. What we're looking today is access to nature. When we started building the concept, we started looking for a program, a certification program, that in a way can, since we do come from a corporate background, we needed the checks and balances. And close to 2010, we came across the Living Future Institute. We met Jason and they were working with the LBC program, the guideline, the 1.0, and we decided to register one of our buildings. And working with them in one of the charrettes in Mexico, we worked with Richard Graves as soon as Jason left, then with Amanda, and we saw that we had something bigger in our hands. We could go for the whole neighborhood. That benefited, I think, both parties. Since we did the process together, they started building the guideline for the Living Community Challenge at the same time that we were building our vision for Reserva Santa Fe. We saw very clear benefits of involving the International Living Future Institute. We love the holistic approach, like Jason was saying today in one of the conversations. They involved equity as a key part of making a true sustainable project. Again, like I was explaining with this COVID and the whole pandemic being inside, we saw that there's a reaction to the real estate market today with the access to nature, one of the clear benefits. We saw that if we follow the framework of the LCC, it will allow us to meet the goal of having a positive impact on the environment, returning more of the resources obtained with the ecosystem, improving its condition for present and future generations. We will be providing high efficiency and quality community service and not depend on government-owned utility companies like it's used in Mexico. And one of our main goals, if we follow this framework, we will avoid the fragmentation of an important part of the biological corridor and increase the environmental services. Of course, as its name says it, we're facing huge challenges. One of them is to integrate a team that aligns with the philosophy and the vision of Reserva Santa Fe and of the framework of LCC. Public policies and regulations has also been a challenge. It encourages traditional forms of construction and the consumption and supply of fossil fuels. and shifting that has been a challenge. Again, we're facing the challenge into how to avoid genetic isolation by incorporating a neighborhood inside a protected land. So we are implementing several types of systems to avoid this. And the final one, of course, is cost. It's a different approach. It's not necessarily a numeric challenge. It's more a challenge for the designers and for the construction companies. We need them to take a different approach to design to be able to compete with traditional type of constructions. And this is what we came up with. It's a project, we're developing a one-of-a-kind project in Mexico where we can further develop a self-sustained community, one that is resilient to future challenges, receptive and impartial to culture, history, and site specifications. The site is a 662-acre project where 450 acres are destined for conservation and 200 acres destined for development. We're going to be having 500 homes and over 4,000 occupants. We're introducing 5 LBC buildings. We are having over 17 miles of pathways, 5 miles of internal roads, and having 51 acres of urban agriculture, 12 acres inside the community, and 39 acres outside. Again, a key factor to provide to provide a new source of income to the locals through agriculture. This is an aerial picture of the site where you can see the 2 basic principles of the project. The first one is to build the project where the farmers used to farm. The second one is to keep the forest in a single unit and protect this habitat. These are some images or renderings with the project. And we are trying to give our residents and our users a true car-free living experience. We are prioritizing pedestrians and bikes above anything else. We're introducing the 17 miles of pathways that I was talking about, and we're also introducing a bike sharing program. We're introducing internal electric public transportation. Our real goal is that if you have a car, once you park it in your home, you never have to use it again. You can move to anywhere inside the community without the use of your car. We also understand how critical our ecosystem is. That's why we are introducing vegetation and a reference habitat. Again, the knowledge of our baseline is hugely important for this. Biophilic design has been a key aspect in order to achieve all of our goals. We are incorporating 4 artificial lakes as a part of the strategy to have a closed water cycle and having our own microgrid to provide with 105% of the energy for the entire community. Wrapping up, the whole concept of Reserva Santa Fe revolves around living in harmony with nature. And we designed several different types of amenities and services for users to experience it. And yes, that's me climbing a 100-foot tree, and this job has some additional perks. So let me hand this off to Juan so he can talk about the baseline.
Thank you. This is awesome. I'm very happy to be here with you guys because I feel that after all these years, I am a small part of the project, and I have worked within it in several different occasions. And having that experience, it was what inspired me to use this example in which we have worked together, and also communicate to the audience the new ecology of place imperative that it's in the new version of the LBC, which is a change from previous versions. And for me, this is a very important milestone because I have, through my career, worked in a direction which introduces sustainability in a more related to living systems in a more strong way that usually environmental or green building is considered. In the new ecology of place, all projects need to demonstrate that they contribute positively to the ecology of the site. All projects needs to prove that they are restoring, recovering, or enhancing the ecological performance of the site. And this in relation with the culture and social equity factors that the community needs to also embrace. The ecology of place has 4 main steps. First of all is to identify a reference habitat. This implies to understand where you are, understand what is the potential of the place that you are occupying or you are attempting to develop in different ways, and try to understand what is the reference, what habitat is more preserved, has more integrity, has more functionality that you can use as a reference in order to inspire and guide your own recovery towards that goal. Number 1. Number 2 is to understand what is the baseline or of the ecological condition that currently exists in the place that the project is going to land. And for this, it is amazing that ILFI was able to establish a relationship with the Society of Ecological Restoration in order to bring that methodology in also to apply it in this regard. So by using the 5-star method proposed by the Society of Ecological Restoration, every project needs to establish a baseline. And with that baseline and with that reference habitat, then every project needs to establish a vision, goals, metrics, processes, and monitoring in order to recover those functions. That recovery needs to be expressed, point number 4, by using the recovery wheel that I am going to talk a little bit more in the following slides. But first, let's understand that if you see this graphic to the lower right, the functionality of a place, it's directly related to the ecosystem condition of such a place. So every ecosystem state can be modified or can be tracked from a degraded condition with low functionality to an intact condition with very high functionality to the upper right. The strategies to recover those functions depends on where the state of that ecosystem is. And this 5-star methodology, the 5-star methodology represents a very simple work frame in order to track that recovery. So in the following table, you see the number of stars in the column of the left and a summary of the different levels of performance that each star represents. So it's very simple approach of saying if you have the 5 stars, that means that you have a pristine, all intact, fully functional ecosystem. And if you have 1 star, implies that you are starting to improve that site. The next, these 5 stars need to be evaluated within the attributes of the ecosystem. So these 6 concepts that you see in the column of the left, threats, physical conditions, species composition, structural diversity, ecosystem function, and external exchanges, those attributes, they provide a mean to understand the whole complexity of the ecosystem and to understand which elements are the ones that we need to intervene in order to start the recovery process. So each one of these attributes can be in a 1-star condition or in a 5-star condition, right? So if we do have threats, if we have active threats and we are starting to address those threats to our place, we are probably in 1 star. If we have addressed all threats and there's no threats anymore into the ecosystem functions, then we are in the 5-star degree. You can see down there the previous, just to mention the citation of the source of this information is down there in the International Standards for the Practice of Ecological Restoration, which is a paper published by SER. Okay, in the next one, and very quickly, first of all, we need to understand where we are. So as Armando mentioned, Reserva Santa Fe, it's located in the Trans-Mexican Volcanic Belt, which actually it's a chain of mountains that joined the two Sierra Madre to the west and to the east in the center of Mexico. And over there, above 10,000 feet of elevation, we have these alpine conifer grasslands, wetlands, and a very complex biome that is located in Reserva Santa Fe. You can see over there in this image how fragmented that forest has become. And you can see the polygon within that pink polygon. You can see the greener, smaller one, which is Reserva Santa Fe itself. The reference habitat was located in another section of the protected area, which is very well preserved with a much more ecological integrity that these other areas have currently. And it's located in this protected area called Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla, within the municipalities of Ocoyoacac and Coajimalpa. I always like to say Ocoyoacac. Many of our counties' names also have First Nations, we will say here in the US, but indigenous group names, and Ocoyoacac and Coajimalpam, it's also one of those. So this area, it's also an ABS-dominated forest with some areas of mixed oak forests, and we have more than 300 identified species in those areas. You can see in this polygon the area of Reserva Santa Fe into the upper left and the different polygons of the protected areas, and the orange dotted polygon is what Reserva Santa Fe is considering the reference habitat. So the main threats to Reserva Santa Fe are summarized here: the changes in land use, fire, over-extraction not only of wood, but also of topsoil, also of illegal hunting and epiphyte species, and over-extraction of resources. Climate change and other conditions, this drying of the aquifers that Armando mentioned also bring some stress into the forest that create susceptibility for more pests. Armando also mentioned the invasion of squatters and drought and climate change. So these are the main threats identified by Reserva Santa Fe. Now, using the 5-star methodology, Reserva has implemented several studies of major biological groups and the whole ecological system. And they have identified this list of number of species, including some protected and some critically endangered. It's also recognized that erosion, compaction, reduced infiltration, and other components are part of the baseline in which Reserva Santa Fe started its process. The goal, one of the major goals, I will say, because in terms of this ecological recovery, is to fulfill the imperatives of the LCC, including the LVC buildings that are going to be there, and recover the ecosystem services. Water The whole water system is being used as an umbrella indicator that will reflect the regeneration of the site. Other indicators related to that is the percentage of vegetation coverage, the recovery of natural water flow, species richness, and overall biological diversity. There are some strategies already in place in order to accomplish these goals. One is to establish clear guidelines and regulations that apply to the future low-impact development in terms of the footprint, the species that can be used, how water is used, what chemicals are used, etc. A second strategy, it has multiple components into it. And this strategy could be the main one to protect and rehabilitate the site. It has several lines of action, including erosion prevention, soil restoration, forest fire prevention, forest health, monitoring and management, forestry management, reforestation and natural regeneration, water collection, infiltration, and filtration, and biological monitoring. And something amazing of this is that most of the people that are working in these lines of action, traditionally their families used to be families that depended on the extraction of these resources and selling it in a very low price. And now their descendants, they have become master experts on this stewardship of erosion control, pest management, etc., which is a very amazing thing to see. And another third strategy is the environmental protection program through construction and also through the occupation phase. Fourth strategy for protection and rehabilitation, it's a more targeted recovery program for species of interest. And this is a very important one because that image that you see over there of this transvolcanic quail, it's a critically endangered species that has been already proved that returned into Reserva Santa Fe. And this is video of their presence captured recently in the area. You can see the date of that video right there. The fact that this species, the chiviscoyo or gallina de monte, is returning to Reserva Santa Fe is one already a huge success in terms of the recovery of the ecosystem. Because the only reason that this species is returning is because of the protection that has been already happening over there. Another result that it's already proved to happen is a recent study made with a normalized difference vegetation index in which satellite photos are used in order to see the progression on land cover and how it increase or decrease of different types of vegetation. And already 80% of the understory of forest vegetation has already recovered in the Reserva Santa Fe, 1.4 increase in mature forest, and 25% increase in grasslands and vegetation. So these are already the success results of this monitoring and process. And the recovery wheel, it's a very simple way to express these differences. So we have on the left, you can see the 6 composition of somebody is, could you unmute somebody that is over there? Oh, I can unmute them. Okay. So sorry for that, but we have 2 wheels here. To the left is the baseline represented by these green belts that cover the different 5 progressive rings from the center to the perimeter in each one of the 6 attributes that we talked before. And you can see from the baseline the conditions in which Reserva had at the very beginning of the project, how you can address each individual attribute to establish a vision, goals, strategies, and targets. In order to transition to the left, we show the recovery progression of the whole 6 components in the ecosystem as a whole. So this is very exciting, not only because Reserva Santa Fe is proving it, but it's also exciting because it's a method that can be useful to inform design and guide the process. So we don't have a lot of time, but we do have some questions in order to trigger all of you to either consider some elements of this project that could be transferred to a project that you are working on, or if you want to do another question in the chat, we can address some of those directly. Which are the critical elements of the Reserva Santa Fe project? Are they similar to other projects, or can you identify elements that can inform your projects in which you collaborate? And finally, we would like to know if the 5-star method and the recovery wheel are helpful as a guiding framework, in your opinion. So I have here in the chat, Armando and Pedro can also see it. And I see some questions already. Let me see. Glad to hear this imperative is part of the core and LBC. Is there a session specific to the core green building certification? I don't know, Helen, if you're referring to a session right now in the conference, or well, I will answer that question saying that, yeah, I am super happy that this is part of the imperative now, because it's directly related to the green building imperative. I love seeing the specific targets that the project set and how performance is being tracked. Setting clear and inspirational goals is important. Tracking progress and adapting to real conditions over time to meet those goals is even more important. Oh, some people, Armando, are wondering about the logo of the beetle and the presence of the beetle, of the logo, that they're wondering if there's that probably there's a great story behind that. So would you like to share a little bit of that?
Okay, yes. I'm going to get a little personal here, but I think that I've always believed, since I've been visiting Reserva's site, that diversity is something that we need to promote everywhere, not just in nature. And I really love beetles because the Coleoptera order is one of the, well, I think it's the largest order of any animal in the animal kingdom. And I'm obviously not a biologist, so please correct me, Juan, if I say something stupid, but I understand that there are something like 350,000 species that we have now cataloged of different types of Coleoptera. And it's amazing to me how they adapt to every single type of ecosystem on the planet, and they've lived through everything. I understand that they are absolutely indispensable as far as pollination goes, and many other things. You know, they get rid of all dead carcasses and clean up everything. But they also, I understand they are like very resilient, and it is this resilience that really gets to me. And personally, I believe that we would be better off if, as people, if we learn from that, because when we want to control our lives, we'll find that there are things that we won't be able to control. So it's better to adapt, and they are the best teachers of that. And so with all this, and there's also an incident with the Otomi people that it's kind of a long story, but to make it really short, Pedro was mentioning how his first day at work was carrying all these flowers and fruits to take it to the Virgin, La Virgen de los Remedios, it's called. And we have a sanctuary within Reserva Santa Fe that the Otomi people use very, very often. And once a year, 1,000 people come into the sanctuary to pay their tribute to this Virgin of los Remedios. And so when we were talking to the leader of the sanctuary, who really made all this excellent work at bringing the people together and letting them know that the project would not hurt their ability to keep their culture and keep visiting the sanctuary, he made us go to all these pilgrimages and offered to the Virgin in several points close to Reserva, that we would really protect the sanctuary, that we would protect the Virgin, that we would always allow them to come in, that we would do some of the most, very, very new or unused strategies, legal strategies to make sure that this, that they will always be able to come into the sanctuary. And so after all of these negotiations and offerings to the Virgin, in the last of the rituals that we did, one of the Otomis was digging on the ground precisely so we could put the flowers and the fruit and the copal and the smoke and all these vases and things to offer to the Virgin of los Remedios. And he hit a vase from a previous burial there, and the beetle came out. And so everybody, this guy threw out the shovel that he was shoveling with, and everybody was very tense, and because an animal had been there. And so they were all very quiet, and I felt, the need to say something because it was very tense. So I just grabbed it and I said, it's probably a female, and she came here to lay her eggs, and she's probably going to die now. And the leader of the Otomi people just looked at me and said, so you like these animals? And I said, yes, I love these animals. And I explained why. And she said, well, that's the message from the Virgin, that you have her permission to do Reserva Santa Fe, the Reserva Santa Fe project. So it was beautiful.
Wow. I mean, it's really interesting, Armando, to hear the stories that you guys have lived directly, because this is a very unique project, not only in the thinking and the design, but also in the very deep relationship with the First Nation, that they gave permission in order for you to go ahead, and I was lucky to participate in that first day of Pedro. And
you only took the picture, Juan.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to see how it can be done with a correct attitude. And I really need to give a big shout out to, Armando attitude is the key component of this project. And some people have asked also in the question, this project has 26 years, and how it has been sustained and financed.
Well, that is a tough question, and I'm glad all my partners are not here to talk about this today. But it's really been a crusade, because from a legal standpoint and from as far as the government is concerned, we have done this really with just our own equity and with the help, particularly, of the peasants that became the landowners, of the original landowners. They put the land into a trust. They trusted us with their land. And that is a very big deal, and it's a very big responsibility. But I'm a finance and economic major, so perhaps they want to know how we can manage, after so many years, to have an internal rate of return that works, and it does. And it's because we didn't purchase the land at the beginning. By making the original landowners our associates, we didn't have to put the money down for the land. So we actually pay the land when we sell the lots. And so this is a win-win situation for both of us. Even though they've had to wait for so many years, they're going to benefit from getting into the added value that we're going to put into the land. And they're going to collect a lot more money than they would have if we had purchased the land originally. So it's really a model that we think should be replicated, because it allows communities in the ejidos to stay together, to continue being coerced and to stay socially as a unit. And that really works. That makes a difference.
Armando, if I can add just something to what you just said, I love this question because I've been coming to the conference for many years now, and it's difficult to hear the development perspective when it comes to how to make this profitable. Most of the projects have some kind of equity coming down from government programs or from or the projects themselves come from other type of institutions. It's not actually a business. And we are making it a business. We believe sustainability needs to sustain itself. If the profit is not there, this model won't be able to be replicated. So we've been extremely careful to always look after the business aspect of the company. Like I was telling you, when we got involved with the integrated design idea, we put the finance guy on the table. He was a part of the decision making, being like, can we afford this? Can we or can't we? And that has been a huge asset into how to maintain profitability for the original owners of the land, and of course for the company, in order for this to be replicated and not stay. Our goal, again, like Armando was saying, is not to protect the 600 acres inside of the project, is to protect the thousands of acres around us.
Pedro, could you put the last slide, because we are running out of time and there's some questions also in the chat that probably we won't be able to address in depth. But here are our emails, and we talked before, and we are open to receive questions further and keep the conversation going. This is not only, I believe that this is not only a great example and a great case study for LCC and LBC. It's a huge one for Mexico and Latin America for sure, but I believe it has a lot of learned lessons and path walked through all these years. So we have a couple of minutes. I don't know if you want to share some closing remarks, Pedro and Armando.
For me, it's really, thank you again just to make us a part of the living future. It's one of what Juan said is for these type of projects to be possible, you need to follow a vision. This is Armando's vision, but it's also been guided by the framework of the Institute. So really, thank you for letting us be a part of the living future and hearing us today.
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, this is very emotional to me because I disagree completely with Pedro. This is not only my vision. This is Juan's vision, Pedro's vision, Jason's vision. It's many people, Omar, many people that work for us, and the whole team, even some of our partners that have been adding value to this in the past 26 years.
Don Chola vision.
Don Chola, all of the I mean, of course. I mean, Juan had to camp out the whole summer with Chola to dig out some mushrooms, but it's really an amazing experience. I mean, I don't know if I'm more excited about what's coming or what's happened already, because I've learned so much from all of you and from all of the people that are involved, because the place, as we've mentioned so many times, is what transforms you. And this is what we're betting on. We're betting that our clients, our residents, will come there as disoriented as I did the first time, and just transform themselves. I think that it's an inner transformation that the place absolutely makes it happen. You know, it's unavoidable.
Thank you very much, Armando and Pedro, to sharing this. It was really, really cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Have a great day.